I know you're thinking, Taylor, it's not Thursday again. What's the deal? Why are you doing this now? Being inconsistent with what days y'all release videos. Well, if you've been following along, this is going to be part 2 of the Big 3 series of videos I've been doing over the last 2 weeks. This is week 2. So we have this video and one more video on Thursday. In this video today, we are talking about your shelter and why it is one of the most important parts of your setup and why it will make your backpacking trips really well, or it can turn it really bad. Guys, I'm Taylor and welcome to Southern Hike. So one of the most important things of your setup is your shelter, because you got to have somewhere to lay your head at night and know you're protected from the elements, maybe not a bear, but from the elements, and be ready to go and have enough room for all your gear and just to be comfortable. One of the biggest things is what is going to be the best setup for you. So hammocks, I'm not going to get into that much. I've talked about in the past I'd like to, but I haven't yet. I'm more of a ground to weller just because me and Rachel do a lot of backpacking together. And so we focus more on doing tents. There's different types of tents out there. And today we're going to talk about a couple of them and why some are the pros and cons of each. But I'll go ahead and tell you today we're going to talk about a little of everything as far as it goes in those topics. Let's go ahead and get into the first thing as far as size. So if you're a backpacker by yourself, there's one of the things to consider the most is what size is going to be needed for you. If you're someone who likes to sleep with all your gear inside your tent, you might want to go a little bigger. Or if you're someone who just loads all your gear into your vestibule or hangs it in a tree, then you don't need such a big tent because that benefits you cut weight. One of the things to think about is a lot of people talk about is that they are backpacking by themselves, but they truly want a 2P tent because they want to be able to have all their gear in their tent and be able to spread it out and have room. Well, truth be told, for me and Rachel, and this is not why I'm arguing one way or the other, but I just want to mention, we always go with a 2P and just deal with the room issue because me and Rachel backpack together, and what's worked well for us is that we have a multi-vestibule tent we always buy, and that we just put our packs in our vestibule, and if we got our backpacking chairs, we just go ahead and sit those out there too. And it works out well. Rachel is a very small woman. She doesn't take up a lot of room, and so it works out well with our two 20-inch pads that we're able to fit both in there. So as I kind of hinted at in the last video, that's something else to watch out for is your width. So if you got multiple people, you need to consider the width of your pad. If we bought two 25-inch width pads in our Nemo Dagger tent, it'd probably be kind of tight. It would still be workable, but the sleeping pads would definitely take up more room. That's the first thing to consider is do you need a 1P? Do you need a 2P? Or if you're going as a couple or if 2 people, do you need a 3P? Now, like we're going to move on to topic number 2 is weight. So the more you increase the size of that tent, you're going to have to deal with weight. Something to think about is how much weight do you really want to spend in a tent? To me, I feel like if you really got the budget to spend the money, make sure you buy a tent, whether it be a self-supporting or trekking pole tent. Make sure you buy one that's under 3 pounds. That will honestly get you in a good setup. So that's something to look out for is checking the weight. So a 3-pound tent will do really well. When we really got serious about our backpacking a couple of years ago and I kind of moved away from the cheaper tents, we started with an REI co-op, the Passage 2. They haven't made this one in a while. This one's right over 3 pounds. It did really well. I couldn't tell you how many trips we took it on. And then over the last year and a half, we have had this Nemo Dagger 2P. And these have been our options. These are both going to be self-supporting tents. You do not have to stake them if you're sitting on a rock bed. But they also mean you got to carry stakes for both of them. Now, something to think about is that stakes can be heavy. So this one, I think with the stakes, like I said, is 3.5 pounds. This one with the stakes is right at 3 pounds. And honestly, I would still recommend this tent to anyone. I don't really use it anymore. We kind of carry it just in case somebody else wants to go backpacking with us, and I keep it. That way they can just use it. It doesn't really matter to me. It's just a good option. So like I said, this has been our tent for a while now. This is the tent poles that come with it. But we do have stakes also that go with it, and these kind of break down, I think, at right around 3 pounds, and this is what we use. This is self-supporting, so when I go out west, I don't really consider about what if I can't stake my tent down. I also have to consider if it's windy, you need to stake it down. So that's something to think about too. You know, sometimes you can MacGyver some rocks around your stakes if you have nowhere to drive a stake in the ground. So guys, that is the thing to think about as far as your size and as far as your weight, is kind of thinking about carrying stakes and carrying your tent. Now you kind of get confused online as far as trail weights. I think that doesn't include your stakes. I think it does include your poles though. It's something to watch out for. Another type of tent I just hinted at a couple times already is the trekking pole tent. And I'm excited to say that with the sale I just mentioned a couple videos ago, we picked up the new Gossamer Gear, the 2 tent. And we're excited to get that tent. It's a trekking pole tent. It's right over £1. And I'm like, wow, that's great. And a lot of people get the misconception like, oh man, I just shedded a lot of weight with a trekking pole tent. But you got to remember, if you're not a big trekking pole user, you've got to carry trekking poles. So most trekking pole tents require 2 trekking poles, and you just added a lot of that weight back. I don't have the weight of these CMT ones right off the top of my head right now, but you got to think about that when you're thinking about buying a trekking pole tent to save weight. This can basically add back up to where you have a self-supporting tent with poles, and it's something to think about. Now, at the same time, you can invest in a lot cheaper trekking poles and still keep that weight low. I think honestly, if you really worked hard at it, you can invest some money, you can buy some trekking poles with like the Gossamer Gear, the 2 or the 1, and still stay below 2 pounds and still be set up for that. And that's the thing about it though, is that we had to consider why we've used self-supporting so long. One is because we go out west and we don't know what kind of terrain we're going to be dealing with. It could be a lot of rock bed, and I'm worried about driving stakes, especially like in Colorado too, where it gets windy and I need to make sure that tent stays on the ground. So I have to think about those things at the same time. And then with a trekking pole tent, your tent is basically supported on those stakes. So I was a bit nervous about doing that. And so the other thing is, I do not usually use trekking poles because we film a lot of our trips. Well, I'm trying to work out new ways to be able to still use a trekking pole and have my camera on my chest and not keep it in my hand. Because believe it or not, a lot of these trips we've done, I've carried my camera in my hand the entire time. Now I'm considering doing that, or at the same time, just sticking my trekking poles in my bag like a lot of people do that go backpacking. I was with Jeremiah Stringer just recently on that trip, and he had a 2P Dyneema tent, and it was a trekking pole tent, and he carried his poles even though he was not using them. So that's another way to do it, is just to carry your poles on your back and still have a trekking pole set up. We've talked about sizing, we've talked about weight, and then we've talked about the couple main styles there is as far as trekking pole, and we've talked about standalone tents. So one of the last things to be looking out for is as far as materials. So that is one of the easiest things. Most tents out there, even your cheapest tents, are semi-rainproof. You're gonna have to retreat them later on, but just be considerate of the condensation issues when you buy a tent. A lot of cheaper tents are not good at ventilating. Even with that trekking pole tent from Gossamer Gear, we're basically gonna have to deal with condensation because it's a single layer tent, and something like a ShamWow is something to bring with us just to wipe the easy condensation. But a lot of really expensive tents are good at dealing with condensation, even the single layer of trekking pole tents, so that's something to look forward to. But even with my Nemo Dagger, I have not dealt with any condensation on any trip. It does well at ventilating, but also to make sure the pockets at the top stay open so the tent can breathe. All right, so those are things to watch out for. Not to mention Dyneema. You heard me say that just a second ago. That is one of the biggest things about Dyneema is that it can cause a lot of condensation. So again, be ready to bring something to wipe that condensation out, and be careful that some cheaper ones can cause it to drip all over you and all over your down sleeping bags. All right, guys, again, this is another broad discussion of the second part of the big 3. And I just wanted to kind of give you things to watch out for if you're buying these things for the upcoming season. I hope this is helpful. If I missed some things, make sure to comment below to please share with others. That would be really appreciative. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like it. It's one of the easiest ways to help us out. And Thursday, we will talk about our final topic. So be looking out for that video, and that is the pack. And this is one of the biggest things because this is one of the things I'm shopping for too. So guys, I hope to be able to share you some information if you're in the same boat as I am and shopping for a new pack. And I hope you enjoyed this series so far. And guys, we will see you Thursday.